This MMA 30 segment is powered by The Gun Store. Next time you're in Las Vegas, if you want to shoot a real machine gun, do it at The Gun Store at 2900 East Tropicana. Welcome back to the MMA 30 Radio Hour here on KXNT FM News Radio 100.5. Dave Farra and Jason Mahoney, and we're talking about middleweight rankings. Anderson the Spider Silva is the greatest fighter of all time. There is no question about whether or not he is the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world or the best middleweight in the world.
Without a doubt, man. This guy proved once again that he knows how to finish a fight in dominating fashion, and I don't think there should be a question in anybody's mind that this guy is the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the world. I mean, I love George St. Pierre, but two different leagues, man. Two different leagues.
George St. Pierre were to rattle off his next 10 victories undefeated, and Anderson Silva retires after the next couple, maybe there's an argument to be made there with time, but right now, no question, Anderson Silva demolishes everyone.
How important in pound-for-pound rankings are finishes to you, Dave?
They are important. The reason why is because they show dominance. And actually, Anderson Silva, of course, being at the top of the heap, I actually have Chael Sonnen ranked at number 2 in the world for middleweights because of the performance that he had against Anderson Silva. There was a lot of talk about, well, Anderson was injured. He had a broken rib going into that fight or a cracked rib going into that fight. Look, no excuses. I don't care about excuses. I don't care about what-ifs or the things that are unknown. You can't really factor that in when you're doing things like rankings. Chael Sonnen gets the number 2 spot on my list because of what he did to Anderson Silva for 23 and a half
minutes. The empirical data in the cage for that amount of time proves that Chael Sonnen is a step above the rest of the middleweights who've ever fought Anderson Silva, without a doubt. Even in those fights that we mentioned earlier against Thales Latis and Damian Maia, Anderson Silva was never once in trouble in that fight, and for 23 minutes, he was in trouble against Chael Sonnen. So
he was losing that fight.
He was. Easily. He would have lost that fight had it gone to a decision easily. He would have lost 5 rounds to none.
So no question, Anderson Silva number 1, Chael Sonnen number 2. Looking at the rest of the MMA 30 rankings, you can see them if you go to MMA30.com. Number 10 on the list is Nate Marquardt. Do you agree with that, Mahoney?
You know, that's a tough one, Dave, because Nate Marquardt, you know, he's won 2 out of his last 4. He's been fighting top-level competition. He did beat Dan Miller, but Dan Miller has dropped quite a few in a row. He lost to Yushin Okami for that title fight eliminator, which he choked in that fight. The fight against Rusamal Paul Harris, even though Rusamal Paul Harris is an up-and-coming in the middleweight division, that was just a weird win. Paul Harris was kind of complaining that Nate was greasy, looked to Herb Dean, and then he got TKO'd in the process.
That's one of those excuse-type fights. I think that he went out there and he was beating Rusamal Paul Harris pretty handily.
I don't know. That's an iffy one for me, and then he obviously got worked pretty hard by Chael Sonnen. I think Nate Marquardt's are in the 10 to 13 range.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the top 10 in the middleweight division, I think it thins out there towards the bottom.
Yeah.
I mean, other people that were mentioned in the discussion were Chris Lieben and Jason Mayhem Miller and Kung Lee and Rusamal Paul Harris and Tim Kennedy. Guys like that. I think they just missed.
Damian Maia would be my pick for number 10. I mean, he's real close. Damian Maia has been very impressive in some of his fights.
Number 9 on the list is Vitor Belfort. I think that Vitor Belfort should be number 9 on the list. I would even maybe put him up a little bit higher, perhaps at number 7. He lost in pretty devastating fashion to Anderson Silva with that front kick, but I think that Vitor Belfort is still one of the 10 best middleweights in the world competing today.
I would like to see Vitor fight the loser of the Stan-Sonnen matchup. I think that would be a good. Either way, it would be a great fight for Vitor. Vitor's incredibly explosive, and obviously we saw against Anderson Silva just got caught.
Brian Stann is number 8 on the list. Brian Stann has had a couple of big back-to-back wins. If he beats Chael Sonnen, I think that they're going to give him the title shot, partially because he's so marketable, and then the other half is because Brian Stann is he's beaten guys that a lot of people didn't think he was going to be able to beat because he's been fighting well-rounded individuals. The knockout of Chris Lieben was very impressive, and then George Santiago, who came into the UFC very highly regarded, he also beat him handily. So Brian Stann in the top 10 in the UFC's middleweight division. You cool with that?
I'm okay. I'm okay with Brian Stann definitely being in the top 10. He's looked very impressive at 185 pounds.
Hector Lombard, number 7 on the list. Do you think he belongs there?
You can't deny Hector Lombard's winning streak. You can't, because this guy has rattled off a ton of fights in a row. It's about,
22-fight winning streak?
Yeah, something like that.
Not bad.
Yeah, not bad. But when you start to break that down, though, you really look at it. Who has he beat at 185 pounds? The only name that really comes up that most people know, or even might not even know, is Brian Ebersol, who's just recently started to make an impact in the UFC, but he's making an impact at the 170-pound division. So I think Hector Lombard has been fighting cans, but it's still impressive to beat 22 guys in a row Hands down. So I'm okay with Lombard being right there. I would like to see a step up in competition from him, and he's actually fighting Jesse Taylor today.
Yeah, Hector Lombard being on the list, it's an age-old question. Should guys that fight out of the UFC be ranked as highly as they are? And you can't really answer that question until you see them compete in the UFC, because we know no matter what anyone says, there is a difference in competition.
Take a look at George Santiago.
Next on the list, Michael Bisping coming in at number 6. You happy with that? I know you're not a big personal fan of Bisping.
I'm not a huge fan.
Him.
I'm not a big fan of Bisping, but you can't deny his prowess at 185 pounds. He's rattled off a couple good wins in a row. If he beats Jason Mayhem Miller, I think he's on his way to maybe being a fight away from a title shot.
Number 5 on the list is Mark Munoz, and I think that Mark Munoz, Michael Bisping kind of flip back and forth. Both of them seem like they're very close in the middleweight rankings to me. Mark Munoz may be getting a touch too much credit, but again, if you're looking outside of the top 3, the top 5, the middleweight division is pretty cloudy right now, because there's one guy that's just demolishing everyone, and because of that, you're not having a lot of other really legitimate contenders stack up in a nice, neat row. I think that Mark Munoz does have some really good fights to his credit, and he does have some big wins to his credit as well, so you can't discount Mark Munoz, and I think number 5 is probably a fair position.
But would you ever even think about Mark Munoz versus Anderson Silva?
No, you can't. That's the thing, is that you can't even think about any of these guys.
I wouldn't say any
Silva.
of these
No,
guys.
I mean, you think about Chael Sonnen and Anderson Silva again. That's an interesting fight.
Well, you look one up. You look one ahead of Yushin Okami. Yushin Okami coming in at number 4, dropping down after his loss against Anderson Silva. I'm not mad at that. Okami had put together a pretty decent win streak to get that title match. But you look at Jacare Souza, Ronaldo Souza, and he is the kind of X factor in the middleweight division. He's an amazing Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy who's got pretty decent stand-up and has got a good chin. So I wouldn't mind seeing him coming over from Strikeforce and challenging Anderson Silva.
Yeah, I think that he needs one fight in the UFC before he gets that shot at Anderson
He absolutely
Silva.
does.
Yeah, I mean, if Chael Sonnen wins against Brian Stan, I think that's a pretty easy matchup because their last fight was so close. But yeah, I'm not so sure if Jacare is going to be able to compete with Anderson Silva just because nobody else has. But I do think that he would make a very interesting addition to the UFC's middleweight division.
I think Jacare versus the winner of Miller Bisping would be a great fight to set up a possible title contention.
All right, that is our middleweight rankings. Tell us if you agree or disagree on our website, MMA30.com. Coming up, we're going to look ahead to UFC 135 in just a couple of short weeks from now. We are going to be headed to Denver for UFC 135. Rampage Jackson versus John Jones in the main event of that one for the UFC light heavyweight title. And there is some drama a-brewing between John Jones and Rampage Jackson. We'll tell you about that in just a moment here on KXNT, FM News Radio 100.5 FM. This MMA 30 segment is powered by The Gun Store. Next time you're in Las Vegas, if you want to shoot a real machine gun, do it at The Gun Store at 2900 East Tropicana.